Good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you all to this e-learning platform of KTHM College. In today's session, we are going to have a look at the summary and analysis of Chapter 8 of Animal Farm by George Orwell. Now we'll have the look at the summary. The following year brings more work on the windmill and the less food for the workers, despite Squiller's list of figures supposedly proving that food production has increased dramatically under Napoleon's rule. As Napoleon grows more powerful, he is seen in public less often. The general opinion of him is expressed in a poem by Minimus that lists his merits and virtues. More executions occur while Napoleon schemes to sell a pile of timber to Frederick, who is alternately rumored to be a sadistic torturer of animals and the victim of unfounded gossip. After the completion of the new windmill in August, Napoleon sells a pile of timber to Frederick, who tries to pay with a check. Napoleon, however, demands cash, which he receives. Whymper then learns that Frederick banknotes are forgeries, and Napoleon pronounces the death sentence on the traitorous human. The next morning, Frederick and 14 men arrive at Animal Farm and attempt to take it by force. Although the humans are initially successful, after they blow up the windmill, the animals are completely enraged and drive the men from the farm. Squealer explains to the bleeding animals that, despite what they may think, they were actually victorious in what will hereafter be called the Battle of the Windmill. Some days later, the pigs discover a case of whiskey in Jones' cellar. After drinking too much of it, Napoleon fears he is dying and decrees that the drinking of alcohol is punishable by death. 2 days later, however, Napoleon feels better and orders the small paddock, which was to have been used as a retirement home for the old animals, to be plowed and planted with barley. The chapter ends with Muriel rereading the Seven Commandments and noticing for the first time that the fifth commandment now reads, "No animal shall drink alcohol to excess." This is the summary of chapter 8. Now we'll have the analysis of chapter 8. The number of executions occurring at the farm naturally raises some concerns among the animals, who recall the sixth commandment of animalism: no animal shall kill any other animal. However, as he has done many times already, Napoleon revises the past to suit his present aims and alters the painted commandment to read, "No animal shall kill any other animal without cause." The addition of two words gives Napoleon free rein to kill whomever he wishes, since he determines all causes. And these two words echo the other additions to the commandments, which shades to the fourth and to excess to the fifth. In all three cases, a minor grammatical revision permits major revision of a law that legitimizes and excuses Napoleon's tyranny. As the work on the windmill continues, the animals do begin to starve, as Napoleon originally said they would in his debates with Snowball. Ever the happy sycophant, however, Squealer readily provides list of figures to prove to the animals that they are not starving. Benjamin, the former prime Benjamin Disraeli, the former Prime Minister of England, once remarked, "There are three kinds of lies, damn lies, and statistics," a remark that Squealer's actions here prove true. Like many people, the animals are dazzled by numbers as indicative of scientific sampling and concrete information, despite the fact that they would have sooner had less figures and more food. Official sounding evidence thus convinces the animals that their own rumbling stomachs must be in the wrong. Now that he is in total and undisputed control of Animal Farm, Napoleon becomes a paranoid egomaniac, and Orwell stresses this new phase of Napoleon's character in several ways. First, he virtually vanishes from public. When he is seen, he is first heralded by a black cockerel. Second, he lives in separate rooms from the other pigs and only eats from Jones Crown Derby dinner service. Third, he orders the gun to be fired on his birthday and is referred to with flattering epithets such as protector of the sheepfold. Fourth, he orders Minimus' poem about himself to be inscribed on the wall of the big barn, surmounted by a painting of his profile. Fifth, he has a big name, Pinky. Test all of his food to be sure it is not poisoned. Sixth, he names the completed windmill Napoleon Mill, and after selling the timber, has the animal slowly walk past him as he lies on a bed of straw next to his piles of money. Again, Orwell displays a politician's image as a powerful means of controlling his subjects. None of these unabashed displays of his own importance, however, deter the animals from worshipping him. The poem written by Minimus is notable for the ways in which it resembles a prayer, likening Napoleon to the sun in the sky and flattering him with lines like, "Thou art the giver of all that the creatures love." Note the formal poetic diction found in words like thou, air, and thee that seemingly elevates the dignity of the poem's subject. As a whole, however, the poem portrays Napoleon as an omniscient force. Thou watches over all, comrade Napoleon, that begins brainwashing his subjects from their first living moments. Unlike Beast of England, which called for an uprising against tyranny and an increased sense of unity among all animals, Minimus' poem portrays Napoleon as a greater and better animal than all others, deserving their full devotion. On the surface, such a song of praise might seem like innocent flattery, but the reader understands that the poem is another weapon in Napoleon's propaganda arsenal. Napoleon's relationship with Frederick and Pilkington also reveal his disregard for old Major's principles. Indeed, Orwell remarks that relations between Napoleon and Pilkington become almost friendly when the animals are shocked to learn that Napoleon had been in secret agreement with Frederick to sell him the timber. The reader the reader senses the truth and understands that there never was a secret agreement, but that Napoleon had been sounding each man to see who would offer him a better price. Again, Napoleon is able to manipulate the animal's perceptions in order to make himself appear in complete control. The pigeons that Napoleon releases with their varying slogans resemble government controlled media spreading the official word on a topic to the world and completely contradicting all previous statements when necessary. Another way in which Napoleon manipulates public opinion is his naming the windmill Napoleon Mill. Building the windmill had been an effort of all the animals, but Napoleon names it after himself to again insinuate that Animal Farm has become what it is because of his actions. Ironically, this is true in both the positive and negative sense. Napoleon's leadership has freed the animals from human control, but it has also begun to enslave them to another form of tyranny. As Snowball is deemed responsible for everything that goes wrong on the farm, Napoleon is credited with all improvements. The animals praising him for the taste of the water and other things with which Napoleon obviously had nothing to do reveals the depth to which he has pervaded their minds and terrified them into complete dependence and obedience. The destruction of the windmill marks Animal Farm's final irrevocable turn for the worse. As the windmill earlier symbolized the hopes of Snowball and a future of leisure, its explosion at the hands of the Frederick symbolizes the absolute impossibility of Snowball's dreams. The Battle of the Windmill recalls, of course, the Battle of the Cowshed, but this battle is more chaotic, more bloody, and less effective than the former. A cow, three sheep, and two geese were killed, and nearly everyone was wounded. Like the statistics that proved that the animals could not be hungry, Squealer's logic in proving that the battle was a victory in an incredible display of political double talk at its most obvious and ludicrous. Boxer, bleeding and wounded, cannot conceive how Squealer can call the battle a victory until the pig explains the enemy was in occupation of this very ground that we stand upon. And now, thanks to the leadership of Comrade Napoleon, we have won every inch of it back again. Boxer's deadpan reply to this, then we have won back what we had before, contains a wisdom that even he cannot appreciate, for he is attempting to follow Squealer's logic while simultaneously and unknowingly pointing out the laughable nature of Squealer's claim. Here, as elsewhere, the satire of Animal Farm grows exponentially sharper and more bitter with each chapter. The episode involving the alcohol is notable for the way in which it further characterizes the pigs as the gluttonous animals they are thought to be in the popular imagination, as well as how it offers another example of Napoleon's cold efficiency. His decision to use that paddock as a place to harvest barley instead of the old age home it was originally earmarked to be clearly indicates that Napoleon values profits over revering the aged. This is the analysis of chapter 8. In the next session, we are going to have the summary and analysis of chapter 9. Thank you.